had individual plots of land. From 1623 to 1647, everything worked fine after that. So that's the practical argument. Okay, so historical, I mean, there's so many cases, and what it devolves into is, communism, right? And we know the history under Stalin. For whatever reason, it ends up in totalitarian dictatorships where people like Stalin now get rid of their dissenters, they kill them, and eventually what happens is there's famine because there's no incentive structure. So 10%, 20%, 30% of the population just die off. And so I encourage people to read history about Russia, China, the former Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, Turkestan, Belarus, Bulgaria, Romania, Macedonia, Albania. It goes down. Poland, Latvia, Cambodia, Nicaragua, Angola. Just go down the list, look at history, look at what has happened to all the countries when they tried to implement a solution like that. So that's the historical account for it. Now, the Great Leap Forward in 1958 resulted in famine. They were trying to do on a larger scale, this kind of system, and it just didn't work. But you could see, just looking back at the classroom example, what happened. So I think that's it. I probably had I got 1 minute. So, okay, last thing, money. Money is important to me, right? And this is what I like. Okay, what is money? Because if you talk about any kind of economic system, it's what is money, right? And this is why I'm involved within the Federal Reserve movement. Money is really just the store of value and medium of exchange. If I grow oranges and I want to trade with someone with apples, I can do so, and that's what money is used for, means of exchange. It was inconvenient to barter like that, just exchanging oranges for apples, apples for shoes or something like that. So, but what we needed was something that would make exchange easier, and that's why we had things like gold and silver that was a good medium of exchange. Using that idea and that as a store of value, our money system is entirely different than what money was used for and what it should be used for as a store of value means of exchange. So we have to understand our money system, and 99.9% of the people do not understand how our money system works. So that's, if you talk about economics, and if you can't explain money, then I think you have to study that and study how it works today. So that's very important. So thank you, and thanks SDS for having me speak today.
I remind people that we're going to have question and answer right after the next speaker, Brian Rice, who's going to talk about anarchist perspective. So if you have questions as we're going along, please write them down, and then we'll be coming around the room to do Q&A and commentary. Next speaker is Brian Rice.
I'm just going to speak from here, if that's okay.
Sure, just make sure you're close enough, that's all.
I'm short, so I hope everyone can see me. So it's fitting that anarchists come at the end of this dialogue between these two ideas. One of them being libertarian ideas, which come from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, their 18th century, like June said, Enlightenment ideals. Anarchism is a synthesis between these two great ideas of the 18th and 19th century. So one of them being libertarianism, which is against government control and government monopoly, but presupposes that socialism, which is the collective ownership of the of the means of production and private property, be owned communally. This is from an anarchist perspective, one of the only ways to accomplish individual liberty. What good is government if you can't eat? And what good, So the libertarian view originally, which is very, from my perspective, perverted by these pro-capitalist folks. The libertarian ideas during the Enlightenment period were to say that individuals had equal rights to governments, and that governments had certain borders which could not cross over individuals. This had a lot to do with religious movements, mainly from Catholicism to Protestant religions and Calvinist religions. But so the libertarians will always say that they are against government, but there's another type of oppression that happens without government, and we see that happening now, and it's capitalism. Capitalism, to repeat what June was saying, is everyone owned equal property, which isn't possible. There's a limited amount of space. We don't have infinite amount of land and infinite amount of means of production. So to let a minority control and own those means and that land is domination. Whether it be with or without government, it still exists as long as private property exists. To quote a famous anarchist, Peter Kropotkin, he says, "Socialism can only be realized in a world enjoying the highest possible measure of individual freedom." So the assumption of anarchists is that we can have individual liberty without government, and that collectively owned industries will be the foundation for our individual freedom. And we differ from socialists in that respect. That socialists, if I can speak on that a little bit, assume that state control is necessary for the means of production to be owned collectively, which as anarchists I don't think that is true. I think that the common person has the ability to govern their own lives within their own means, mainly in the form of production. Another way that we differ from socialists is the means in which the work is organized in general. Anarchists are anti-hierarchical, which means that we oppose all forms of domination. And socialism limits that dialogue of domination to strictly almost economic realms between class exploitation. But there are different types of oppression that anarchists are opposed to that does not fall into the framework of socialism, which is, like I said, almost only an economic framework in which to interpret things. There are things like racism and sexism that do have some foundations in economic exploitation, but have very different ramifications on people's lives that socialism and, well, obviously capitalism cannot interpret because their framework is purely in the economic realm of dialogue. So to quote, so we differ from socialists in expanding this liberating view of what can happen when people have control over their own lives. It's not limited just to the economic realm, but it spreads itself to other forms of domination. To quote Karl Marx at the end of Das Kapital, he says, "The mass of misery, oppression, slavery, degradation, and exploitation grows. But with this, there also grows the revolt of the working class, a class constantly growing, constantly increasing in numbers, and trained, united, and organized by the very mechanism of the capitalist process of production." The reason that I read that is because the means in which communist or socialist organization sort of grows in the womb of capitalism. But capitalism's ends are particularly different than socialist ends. Obviously, the profit motive and private property are very different. You have, on the one hand, socialized ownership of land and the means of production, and privatized ownership. So to have that type of production in a socialist world that's organized by specialized labor. John Ryman earlier talked about technology and the role of technology and the increased use of technology and its ability to provide people with material wealth comes from capitalism. So for us to talk about socialism being in existence with specialized labor and factory work still in existence, we're still talking about a certain type of domination. What you're doing still is alienating people from the things that they create themselves by making it into one only particular task that this person is doing repeatedly. Anarchists wish to dismantle that type of production. The type of production that most anarchists, I'm not going to say all, but most anarchists see is more of a form of artisanship. Artisanship meaning you see the whole process of your production all the way through. It's not a mechanical type that's only geared